everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Music Podcast. Once again, welcome back to those who subscribe, and I always appreciate you. Thank you so much. If you like what you see or hear, please consider hitting that subscribe button so I can bring you great guests like the beautiful woman I have today, Nina DiGREGORIO. She is a classically trained violinist holding a master's degree in violin performance. She also holds a bachelor's degree in English. Just out of college, Nina would become part of Wayne Newton's band. She would then become the solo violinist with Toni Braxton. A couple of years there and moved to David Foster, as that played, written, arranged, performed with iconic musicians like Stevie Wonder, The Killers, Deep Purple, Cheap Trick, Donna Summer, so many more. Nina is also a bass player. She's also a writer, an arranger, a vocalist, a pianist, a music business mogul, and entrepreneur. She is the founder and creator of Bella Electric Strings. We're going to talk about that, a corporate entertainment group of players that feature in so many shows, one of them including Femmes of Rock, where classic rock anthems come to life with four beautiful electric violin players, full band, and one heck of a stage production based in Las Vegas. We're gotta be that's gotta be part of it, right? Nina, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to talk about all of this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, based in Vegas, I see the Femmes of Rock uh clips and things like that and what you do. Um, it's a Vegas review type. It's smoke, it's fire, it's lights, it's full band. It's more than playing. It's a huge production, isn't it?
Yes, I like to tell people the Femmes of Rock show, it's less of a band and more of a production show. So you're going to see, video and syncing with the music and more production and things like that. And different venues, we have different levels of production. Sometimes we have a synced laser show. Sometimes we have really amazing lights. We've even had pyro at some of our venues, which we always really enjoy the fire. So
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Doesn't everybody like a little fire? It's really, really cool. Based in Vegas, like I say. So, this is not foreign to anybody that has been to Vegas, and it is that kind of a thing. Um, how do you get into this? Tell me, let's start at the beginning. What your upbringing as a kid? Music in the house, parents into music, musicians themselves. How's that work for you? What first got you into music?
Well, neither of my parents were professional musicians. My father was a police officer and a fireman, and my mom was a finance manager at a college. And we had a piano in the home when I was young. My mom had taken a few lessons as a child, not a pro musician. And my dad had an acoustic guitar in the house that he kind of taught himself some chords and he would tinker around. But I would say, my father was a pretty big music fan. And so he would be listening to music when I was really young, roots of rock and roll stuff, like we're talking Elvis and Little Richard and Chuck Berry and stuff like early Motown, the Drifters and Smokey Robinson and things like that. And so I was exposed to that kind of music early on. And then also, of course, classic rock type stuff, starting with the Beatles and moving forward. And my mom had a few like Led Zeppelin type albums and Deep Purple. And my dad was really into horn bands like Chicago and Earth, Wind, and Fire. And also, he was a big Genesis fan. So I was exposed to the music in the house. And sometimes my father would play the chords to some Beatles songs and I would pick out the melody on the violin. And when my mom would be cooking dinner, we'd be playing Beatles songs, for fun. And so that was something we did in the home, though I didn't come from a professional music family.
Wow. Now you mentioned playing it on the violin. I know I've heard that you wanted to be a sax player. And I mean, it's obvious from your resume and things you've accomplished in your life. You are somebody that you want to do something, you go do it, and you do it with, demanding fashion. Master's degree, bachelor's degree, you own your own company, you're an entrepreneur. These are things that the ordinary person may not have the determination to to do. You accomplish things. You want to be a sax player. I expect that Nina DiGregorio would be a sax player. So, you got the violin in your hands. Why are you a violin player and not a sax player?
Well, early on, when I wanted to play the saxophone because of my exposure to the roots of rock and roll type music, I chose it in fourth grade as my main instrument. But the band director said I was too small. I mean, I'm 5'2" and 102 pounds soaking wet, so I'm very
Right.
small.
Right.
And I wouldn't be able to carry it to the bus. And they suggested I played the violin in elementary school because it was lighter. And I was just agreeable. And I said, okay. And so that kind of started it out. But it turned out that I was okay at the violin. And so I kept progressing and I did the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra, and I did all of the Al County and all state orchestra festivals and the solo competitions. And then, it kind of just happened,
Yeah.
moving along stuff just happened, and that became my main instrument. Even though the piano was my first instrument, I have really small hands, which is not the best for the violin, but it's really not the best for piano. So although I did study classical piano, I pursued violin in college.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because my son, also a player, he's a bass player now. But in fifth grade, he was given a choice of an instrument and he chose the bass, double bass, stand-up bass. We had to buy a new car. And it was a you know, luckily he's 6'5" and he's a skinny kid, but he could handle that instrument. So I know what he was saying with being too small, or because that was he brought it home and I said, wow, we got to house this thing, where are we going to put it?
Well,
So
the only thing worse would be a harp. That would be
right.
transport.
Yeah, yeah, it was something. But when you were coming up and you're exposed to all this music, it's rock music. It's got, like you say, that Motown stuff has some other instruments like saxophone, but none of it really has violin. The rock music with violin. Did you look into that a little heavier? The Kansas, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, maybe Zappa, King Crimson. Very few bands had violin parts. Was that something that you kind of studied, grabbed those bands and studied them?
Well, of course, I'm aware of the founding violinists in rock music, and I love all of that music that you mentioned. Want to be the violin player in the band. I wanted to be the lead guitar player on violin in the band. So I think that my style that I have kind of focused on has been a little bit different in that sense, and that I really didn't want to sound like a violin or be used like a violin would be used in the traditional sense of the instrument. I wanted to kind of push the boundaries of what the violin could sound like and what it was capable of doing and being in a band, and typically, like any of the bands that you mentioned, they could do a gig without the violin player if they needed to, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
violin, I've done this my whole life. It's the strings are fluff. So the first thing someone cuts if they can't afford them on the tour or on the album are the live strings. That's the first thing that goes. But I wanted to create something that would not be, you know, couldn't be cut, that was going to be necessary to the actual fundamentals of the band happening, like the drummer or the bass player. It's not happening without them. And so I think that what I've tried to achieve with my sound is a little bit different than being like the fiddle player in a band or the violin player in a band. It's kind of somewhere between that and being the lead guitar player in the band.
Yeah, and we talk about that now. Where I was gonna say Nina DiGregorio, electric violin player, but you're more than that. That is what you specialize in, we could say, because what people are seeing now for sure is you and this monster violin, this electric fretted guitar-like violin, and I know that's a no-no to say, because it's a violin, it's not a guitar. Um, so for the layman, hearing that, and I am somebody who appreciates all kinds of music, and this really interests me. So, I run out and I get this many years ago, uh, Mark Wood. And you play a wood violin, I believe, right?
My Viper violins are all wood violins.
Yeah. He's brilliant. But I put this on and it sounds like a guitar. So those are the things that, people who don't play necessarily are going to hear. "Oh, well, it's like he's playing a guitar." What are the biggest differences when you pick up an electric violin and you have the frets and you're playing things like Eruption, those solos in this rock music? What are the biggest differences between that and playing a guitar?
Well, I would say it's more like the differences between playing that and an acoustic violin. It's nothing like, okay, so a guitar wasn't always electric, right?
Right?
I mean, at some point they invented the electric guitar and it didn't used to be electric. And I wasn't around then, but I remember reading that it was a big deal like when Bob Dylan went electric, that some people really revolted against the idea of an electric guitar completely. Um, and you played the instrument for the electronics a little bit more, but it also gave you this expansive ability to be able to create completely new sounds that no one had ever heard before for the instrument. And so an electric violin is really the equivalent of going from an acoustic guitar to an electric guitar. It's just like an acoustic violin, the way that you play it, the technique that you need to play it. Adding strings, no different than adding strings on a guitar or a bass. You could play a 5 or 6 string bass, you could play a 12 string guitar, still the same basic instrument. You're just adding strings for the extra range. And same thing with the frets. You can get a fretless bass, you can play a fretted bass. You can get a fretless guitar, you can play a fretted guitar. So adding the frets also doesn't change the fact that you need to be a violinist to play it. A guitar player couldn't pick up one of my Viper violins and remotely begin to play it. You can ask my husband, he knows, he's tried.
It's got to be, yeah, it's got to be strange.
Well,
Because especially, the fretted, I see what you're playing in the Eruption video, which is just skyrocketing. It is viral. It is, seen all over the world, which is fantastic. Um, it has the look of a guitar. It has frets like a guitar, very, very close together. It looks like, a small, tiny version of a guitar. That's gotta be strange for, I mean, most classical violinists are playing a fretless. There's the frets on a violin just kind of aren't, in the standards, it's is different. Um, it's got to change the approach a little bit, flat and round wound strings, steel as opposed to all of these things. Uh, how do you set up your electric? Do you set it up like a guitar?
no, so basically, one thing that a lot of people don't understand, they think that this is something new and groundbreaking to have frets on a violin, but they're centuries ago. We're talking like Renaissance times. Early ancestors of the violin and the viola and the cello had frets on them and
Really?
multiple strings, many strings, long before an electric guitar existed. So
Okay.
anyone who's studied it all in music history would know that it's just, it's something that was very popular back then. And then the classical violin became popular, kind of in classical times for that type of repertoire. And now the fretted instruments are coming back with a modern twist, but it's nothing new that wasn't done 1600s, I mean,
Okay.
very,
Yeah, I did not know that. Yeah.
yeah. So if you look up, like, for instance, the instrument called viola da gamba, you'll see like an early ancestor of a modern day orchestral string instrument with frets on it. And
Wow.
yeah. And so that's one thing that I always tell guitar players when they think they've got the claim on frets, over the violin. Do a little research about some of these early instruments because
Yeah,
all it is like a trend of the way that you play it and the type of music you play. It changed for a bit and now it's changing back, but it's adding some modern elements to it by being electric this time.
yeah,
So, in terms of how I set the instrument up, so on my 7 string violin, it's the top 4 strings are the same as a regular violin from the top to the bottom, E, A, D, G. And then it goes down in fit. It's also tuned in fifths, just like a violin. So not in fourths like a guitar. So the strings below the G would be C, F, and B flat. So that the fingering stays within the normal range of what a violinist is used to on the higher strings. And
now, is
the
that E in the same octave on the
oh,
electric?
a lot of
Or
people also have a
is it,
misconception about that. They think, oh, well,
it's higher on the violin, right?
the top string on a violin is an E, the top string on a guitar is an E. You could tune it the same way. Well, you can't because the top E on a violin sounds an octave higher than the top E on a guitar. I'd have to tune it down an octave and make it all floppy, which doesn't even make sound at that point.
Right.
So the reason I have the 7 strings is so I can play a lot of these guitar solos in the same octave range that the guitar played them in, because I can't play them up on that string if I want them to sound just like the guitar sounded. It sounds too
Right.
high. It sounds like a violin.
Right.
So it's fundamentally a violin with extra strings. And in terms of how the frets work, when you play with the frets, you're supposed to play with very light pressure on top of the fret. You don't actually play in between them the way that a guitar player would with much larger frets. The
Right.
strings are also have a lot of tension. And so, for instance, trying to do the tapping technique took a really long time because the instrument acoustically trying to tap doesn't speak at all. Whereas a guitar, you can still hear the tapping sound even if
Right.
you're not plugged in. You could do it on a classical guitar, not so on a violin so much. So I had to really try and navigate some of the problems with having the instrument speak and being able to hear it. And then when you amplify it so much, having so much noise come off of the pickups when you do so because it's not natural for the instrument. So this is something I experimented like a mad scientist with for a very long time with a lot of different sounds before launching the eruption video. Um, but the bottom strings, the really thick strings, the B flat string, the F string, those are kind of custom made strings that you can't just go to every music store and find. Mark Wood, I'm sure, had messed with different types of strings, bass strings, cello strings, different lengths, different tensions to try and find some sort of custom, thing that worked on a violin drawing sound with a bow like that because you can't just cut up a string from a bass guitar and stick it on there and expect it to work.
Right. Yeah. And I would imagine it's got a different feel for the bow too. Because I mean you're running a bow across these strings. It's got to wear differently than a steel string has to wear differently than a softer string on the hair of the bow. Are you using a regular bow with a horsehair bow?
It is a horsehair bow, but on my 7 string and my 6 string, I use a bow called that's made by Coda Bow called the Jewel. And what it has is the weight distribution is shifted a little bit so that you can really dig in at the frog of the bow so that you can draw sound on those super thick strings. I found that when I tried to use my regular violin bow on those really thick low strings, it wasn't drawing the sound. So I did get a special bow that works better. And I also use well, right now I'm using magic rosin, which is a real sticky rosin, and I don't use that when I play classical acoustic violin. I use Gustav Bernadel rosin for that, but for this situation where I need a real sticky rosin and I need to really dig into those low, thick strings as much as possible, I have a different set of accessories that I use for that instrument.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine, I just figure, I'm watching, the bows they're durable, but they're fairly delicate. And running them hard across steel strings, I would imagine wears pretty heavy on, the hair of the bow. I would imagine by the end of a show, you've got some fray coming out of that bow. It tears it up pretty good.
Well, the difference between flat wound and round wound makes a difference, which is why,
Okay.
like, if you try and draw a bow on guitar strings or bass strings and they're sticking up more, and it's going to shred your bow. Like if you
Right,
ever watched like a guitar player come and take a bow and draw sound with it during their show, like Jimmy Page or somebody like that,
right,
to do that consistently, you're just going to shred all the hair on the bow. It's not,
right.
it's like used as an aesthetic enhancement for the instrument. It's
Yeah,
not used to actually play the instrument in like a super technical way.
right,
So
right.
that's when people are always like, oh, well, Jimmy Page already did that. I'm like, well, no, Jimmy Page didn't play Paganini on his guitar with, did something different with it, which was extremely cool and extremely innovative,
Oh
but
yeah.
it wasn't that he wasn't doing the same thing. So
No, not at all, not at all. Yeah, so when your strings are they're flat.
yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah. That's all of this is very, very interesting. Because these little minute details make all the difference in your sound, the durability of the instrument. It's just really you've got this down to a science. Many, 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 many months of getting it right. So, it's not something you'd pick up and just do it, in a couple minutes. What happens if, you say like a guitar player could not do this? And I imagine that. What about Nina strapping on a guitar? I know you play bass. Um, if you were to put on a guitar, you'd find a home there, right?
Well, I self-taught guitar when I was maybe 12, 13 years old. I picked up my dad's guitar. I picked up his fake book. I learned all the hand positions for the chords. I I'm a note reader, so tabs were always hard for me. I hate trying to figure out solos with tabs because I'd rather just see the notes and play them. But I was already reading music and I was already kind of self-taught with chords. So I'm not a practiced guitar player. If I needed to play some backup rhythm in a band, I could handle that. But if I needed to learn like the crazy train guitar solo on a guitar, I would have to really practice that. And I'd probably need a few lessons because I'm sure I do certain things the way a violinist would do them, like vibrato. When I do vibrato on a guitar, I look like a classical violinist doing vibrato.
Right, right.
Not doing it the right way. And so it's a little bit different, but
Yeah, yeah, that'd be
and a
cool.
guitar as like a second guitarist, who's playing. I,
Right,
I couldn't be like the shredder in the band unless I really sat down and put like a whole bunch of hours into it.
right. Now you do play bass, which to me seems like, you have violin and viola and cello and bass. It's a really large violin. Is that, years ago I had Jake Shimabukuro on the show, and I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's an ukulele player. Um, Four strings. He thought when he played a genius. When he played the instrument, he thought of it as a string section. The violin, the viola, the cello and the bass. When you're playing bass, is it like a big violin to you? What's your approach to an electric bass as opposed to your approach to a violin?
Well, so
Completely different?
a bass also is not tuned in fifths in electric bass. It still has the EADG like
Right.
like a guitar would at the bottom. So the fingerings are different. The scales you're going to do are different. So you can't just translate your fingerings from a violin to a bass. You have to get used to your open strings being in a different place when you're playing all that stuff. Um, Also, playing with fingers instead of a bow is a totally different type of technique. You're drawing your sound in a completely different way. And also, one of the reasons I wanted to play the bass was because I didn't want to have to be the solo instrument. I kind of wanted to take a break, and I wanted to hold down, the fort and drive the bus with the drummer and not have to be the one that had to be all notey and flashy and jumping on tables all the time and everything like that.
Right.
So I was at a point in my life when I self taught bass that I joined a band as a bass player so that I could kind of approach the music from a different way. When you're approaching it from the place of a bass player and holding down the rhythm and the roots, of course, there are some bass players who go way beyond that with what they do. And like some of my biggest influences, like Geddy Lee, for instance, you can't really put him in the same category with a lot of other bass players.
Yeah.
And I love learning his bass lines because of that. But I just kind of was in a place in my life where I didn't want to have to be the solo instrument all the time. I was sick of the violin for a little bit and I wanted to just learn something different. And I was like, who's the most chill person in the band all the time? It's usually the bass player. So
Uh,
I'm going to just play bass and just chill out for a little while.
It's
But
cool. And I love watching. What was that?
I said it's a different approach than playing the violin, which is a really high strung instrument, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
one.
Yeah, and it's and to the bass, frets. You're like a guitar. You're playing in between the frets, most of the time. A fretless bass. Uh, is that more comfortable? Would that be more comfortable to you?
I have one. I have an acoustic fretless bass, and I use it rarely, only if I'm trying to achieve like a certain thing with a recording, a certain sound or something like that. So I don't have a lot of experience on fretless bass, but I think I probably have a bit of an advantage playing a fretless just because of all my experience with fretless string instruments for all
That
the years.
that vibrato on a fretless.
It's easier for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you're drawing, you'd be drawing a lot of sound, um, with the fretless as opposed to the frets. Yeah,
Yes, definitely the left hand technique and the vibrato is easier for me on a fretless bass than it is on a fretted guitar, for instance, just because it's more in line with what I've learned in my
right.
classical studies.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. COVID was rough for you guys. I know that. Your husband Brody also in entertainment, does a lot of this with you. Things back on track for you. Silver linings are the videos, right? The social media taking off. Um, Business seems to be back on track. How has it changed pre-COVID to now? You were at this point, COVID happened, you hit rock bottom, you come back up. Are you at the same point? Do things run differently?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole world is a little different now than it was before. 2019, we had a great year. The Femmes of Rock show was picking up momentum. 2020 was set to be our best year yet with tour dates and corporate events for the Bella Electric Strings. And like I said, my husband does the same type of thing. He's a show producer and, a musician himself. And within the first week of the COVID closings, I think I had lost $100,000 in contracts, like just gone on the year. And then, of course, all the rest of them fell like dominoes. And so I had always been my mother, who was a finance manager at a college, she taught me from a young age to always be, smart with money and finances and bills and always have 6 months of expenses saved in the bank just in case something ever happens. And I always thought I did a pretty good job of that because my job is kind of diverse. I always figured, well, if the big tours go away, I still have corporate events. And if the corporate events go away, there's still weddings. And if the weddings go away, there's still bar gigs. And if the bar gigs go away, I can still teach music lessons. There's always something. Like I had like 7 degrees of things that I could fall back on to still pay my bills, but all of them went away at once. Every single possible avenue for making money went away. And I have to credit my husband because I was 9 months pregnant at the time and I went into a pretty bad depression about music and the state of the world and everything. It was a hormonal time, just about to have a baby. And then with the money stuff and not knowing, no one had unemployment yet for self-employed people. No one was offering help with mortgages yet. We didn't know what was going to happen, but he figured out how to live stream concerts from our home studio at the same quality and the same mixing ability that he would in a venue. And the fact that he was able to figure out the production on that to put out, not just like you set up your cell phone and you're hearing someone's cell phone audio. Like he actually was mixing his audio for his live performances up to the same quality that we were in our live tour dates. And so
Great.
after he started doing that, I started taking notice of that and I joined him on a couple of his live stream sessions, and people were sending us tips. A lot of our fans never lost their jobs. And
Right.
so they knew we were having a baby, and people started sending us, like, buying a concert ticket. We'd be like, we're going to play for an hour and a half on this day. We'd set up a session and we'd set up a PayPal link if you want to give us a ticket price donation, like we're doing a show. And people would set it up on their home speakers and blast it like they were at a live show. And so he really kind of got that going. And from there, I started doing these recordings of the solos that I would do in my show and posting them in short reel snippets on my social media. And I learned how to engineer myself in the studio. I couldn't do that. He had to help me in the beginning. Now I can do all the engineering on my own for that stuff. But I started putting them out, and some of them started going viral. And very quickly, I would gain 10,000 new followers a week, 20,000 new followers a week. After I put out the eruption video, I gained 250,000 new followers on all of my platforms in a week. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe we're on to something here. And I never thought of doing this before COVID. And so now it's helped with our live shows because I have so many more people who know about me to be
Right.
in the ticket buying audience. And we really had to pivot there. And I would say, in terms of our number of shows and sales, we're approaching the same place that we were before COVID. And it took us 4 years to get there. But the difference is everything else in the world costs more money now. So my profit margins are much lower than they were, even though we're doing the same amount of business. The cost of flights, the cost of rental vehicles, the cost of gas, the cost of hotels, everything that we have to factor into our tour dates costs more, but we don't cost more. So
Right. Right.
entertainment is kind of a commodity. It's not
Yeah.
something like food where you're going to buy milk, where, no matter what the cost is, you're going to buy it.
Right.
So this is where we're at right now. I would say that we're up to about doing the same amount of shows, but we're not making as much money as we were because the cost of everything else has gone up. Hopefully, inflation will settle itself out at some point and we'll get back to normal. Or I'll just keep building the following the way I've been doing on social media. I plan to put out an original album this year sometime, and the right things will happen. And then the inflation won't matter as much anymore. But, I have to say there's a lot of people in a worse situation than we are in right now. So I have to be thankful that we've gotten through it like
Yeah.
we.
Yeah, and it's great. And I've talked to so many that, find a silver lining in that horrible COVID time. And I see the videos. You're pregnant, you're playing Rush, and Brody's just killing it. I mean, he's so good. With the vocals and everything too, and the videos are such high quality. I'm looking at, how many angles are there, man? There's like, five cameramen or something. I don't know how he does it, but it's beautiful. Sounds beautiful. All you guys are so good. It's really fun to watch. We'll have links down here too, so everybody can check that out too. It's fantastic. Um, I see the Femmes of Rock um, poster is the first before I heard anything. Um, and I'm a red-blooded heterosexual male. Uh, I see that Femmes of Rock poster. It sounds great already. It's one of those things where yeah, I want to see the four beautiful women. I don't care what they're doing. That's something I want to see. And that's that sick, twisted male mind. Um, i- i- does that ever, and I ask this of, the beautiful women that I have on the show. Does it ever, are you ever feel like you're overshadowed by the beauty? And because you're a talented person that has worked very hard for your talents. You've gone to a lot of schooling. This is something that you are proud of. You want people to hear you. But they see you as well. It's a full package. Do you ever feel like that might overshadow all those the talents that you've worked for?
Well, I have to say, after having a bunch of videos go viral and having the amount of eyeballs on my product that have been since COVID, there's just a lot of woman haters in the world that don't hold women to the same standard that they hold men to. So
Still.
almost daily, I'll get 5 to 10 comments a day from men who are commenting on my makeup or my clothing or my body parts, who completely disregard what I'm doing with the instrument, my education, my background, my resume, my ability, everything like that. And the thing is, they don't hold men to the same standard. The thing is, on my home videos, I'm pretty true to myself with my style. When I'm home in my loft here filming videos for social media, I'm in t-shirts and jeans every single time because this is how I dress when I'm at home. When I'm on stage, I dress for a show, just like any rock star would dress for a show with flashing lights and drums and pyro and everything like that. So I have my stage personality and I have my home personality. And I feel like I'm pretty true to that in all of my videos and performances. But the things that men will be okay with, David Lee Roth wearing assless chaps, or Eddie Van Halen
Right.
without a shirt on, or Robert Plant, playing in pants so tight that we can see what all his unborn babies look like.
Right.
But they're going to give me a hard time about, wearing leather pants on stage or something like that. It's a little bit ridiculous, the double standard that's set for women. And then the whole thing becomes about sexuality. No one cares anymore. Well,
Yeah.
obviously you people only like you because you're selling sexuality. I'm like, well, first of all, that's not true. I'm doing something that's extremely unique that very few people play this instrument. So of course it's going to make me stick out more than if I was playing a guitar where thousands and thousands of people are playing this instrument. So I'm playing something unique. But secondly, when was sex never a part of rock and roll? I mean, look at every band. Go back to the Beatles. People are like, no one would like you if you were a 300-pound grandma. I'm like, well, would they have liked the Beatles? Would they have liked
Right.
would they have liked the Doors? Would they have liked Jim Morrison? Like, the image part of rock and roll has always been a part of rock and roll, I think. And in a sense, uh, it would be great to not be able to care. But like I said, it just depends on the person. If someone wants to care about what they look like, who are you to tell them not to care? If someone doesn't care, but they're really good at what they do, I'm fine with that too. I don't care what someone looks like if their music is really great. There's a lot of, like jazz musicians, I don't even know what they look like in real life. I'm not even sure. Who cares? But if you are someone like Jim Morrison who's got a look and a vibe about you and that's who you are and that's what you want to present with your music, all the more power to you. And I think, like I said, there's just a really big double standard with female artists compared to male artists about that whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And it's getting better, I think, than it was maybe in the 70s, but it's still there, obviously. But rock and roll is kind of that. If I go out and play an Eddie Van Halen solo, it's not gonna maybe be as inviting as if Phil Collin, oiled up Def Leppard guitar player, all cut, looking great, goes and plays that same thing. That we want to see that as well as hear it. So it's a full package. I think a little bit more with rock and roll. It's always been kind of the
Be a
Elvis.
radio star, kind of, right? So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. The Elvis hip shake thing, that was part of his thing.
yeah, you go back to Elvis. I mean, Elvis was one of the most attractive people to ever live. I
Right.
mean, would he have made it to where he was regardless of his talent? Like I said, look at actors, look at anything in entertainment, not just music. Look at television, look at movies, look at anything. So, I mean, it's part of being the whole package is caring about your image to some extent. And it is what it is. And if you're super good at what you do and you don't want to care, that's cool. If you do want to care, that's cool too. People should just leave you alone. So,
Yeah, and please, people, come on. Uh, you have to put every opinion you have in a forum or in a comment. You know, keep some of the stuff to yourself, please. Um, it's just, so much negativity and derogatory comments, especially about somebody's body shaming or, something like that, or it just, let's stop, people. Come on.
Yeah,
Uh,
or people will, these are all much older men who are commenting on my makeup or things like that. It's like, why would you do that? It's just, it
I don't,
doesn't make, it's obviously not the focal point of the video. It's not like I'm doing such crazy makeup that I want you to look at like it's not the focal point of the video. So why are you fixating on that? It's so weird
it
that
is.
that
It
and
is.
it's 99.99% men that are making these comments to me. I mean, I might have had like one or two women over the last 4 years leave a nasty comment, but it's usually men about makeup. Like I just don't understand. But
Oh well, it's a shame, but it's hard, and it's got to be difficult when you're reaching a lot of people now, and I notice it with my channel. I get comments that are a bit off the wall sometimes. It's like it has nothing to do with the music or anything. It's something about what the guest was wearing or whatever. You're fielding a lot of comments from all over the world that are very, very, very personal. And that's, not everybody handles that great.
I don't always handle it great either. Sometimes I clap back with people and I have like one-liners and I'll be like, all right, well, you think, you
yeah,
know. So
it,
sometimes I engage with them and I probably shouldn't, but I kind of feel like in certain instances, certain people need to be called out. I think that
yeah,
if it's specifically because I'm female, I think that bothers me more than if someone's just like, I hate the electric violin or I hate Led Zeppelin or I don't like the way it sounds. Okay. But if it's something specifically female related, the fact that it's still acceptable in intelligent conversation and on social media to talk that way, I kind of feel like, you know, in the 60s, it was acceptable to use certain terminology about, African Americans just in everyday conversation. And now it's not. It's not acceptable to talk like that anymore, but it's still acceptable to say some of these things about women. And I kind of feel like we need to get to a point where it's called out enough that people want to change it, which I mean, like I said, I didn't live through civil rights, but I assume that enough people called it out that we wanted to change it at some point.
right.
So that's why I speak up on a lot of the comments on my posts about the specifically woman related comments, because I don't think it should be a part of intelligent conversation to talk that way anymore.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. So, like I say, let's do better, folks, please. You mentioned an album of original songs. Um, are you working on it? How far is it? What can we expect?
Well, I have been writing original music, I would say probably since I was about 13 years old. I
Wow.
have notebooks of lyrics. For me being kind of a, English major person, always wrote short stories, always wrote poetry. A lot of my stuff I had lyrics first, which is odd for musicians. Usually I think they have the song first and the lyrics next. So I had, notebooks and notebooks of lyrics. A lot of it I had put chords and music to over the years, starting as an early teenager, never recorded any of it. As I got older, the music changed a little bit. As I discovered things like in college, I discovered Rush and I discovered Frank Zappa. And so I think my style started to trend a little bit more towards interesting instrumental stuff than it did towards the singer songwriter type stuff from when I was younger. But I have this whole backlog of ideas and things that have never been put into a recording. And I think that's kind of the last step. I mean, the thing is, you can get good at your instrument, you can get good at what you do, but putting your own songs out there, that's like the last step of, well, there's always this. And if I put it off and I don't do it yet, there's still the possibility of this happening. And I think like it's a little bit scary to do that because once you put it out there, that's it then. It's like
Yeah.
there's no other thing to try and do. it's either going to work and people are going to like it, or it's not going to work and people aren't going to like it. And then you're just like, okay, well, I'm just going to be doing the same thing the rest of my life now. So I've always had this like this star in the sky of I've got all these original songs and they're still out there and just no one's heard them yet, but I know that they'll be good when they get out there, you know? So it's getting over this fear almost. And you get sidetracked by life. I have two little kids at home. I have multiple businesses, string entertainment related businesses that I run. So having the time to be quiet and alone with your thoughts and to be recording this stuff and getting it down, the time is scarce too. But I think the big thing with a lot of people with original music is this fear of it being that last thing out there that once you put it out there, if it doesn't work, you got nothing else, you know?
Yeah, right.
So it's a big leap of faith, but I'm trying to figure out if I should put out a few albums with different musical themes to them, or if I should just throw it all out there and have it not make sense at all. Some of it's going to sound like Bob Dylan and some of it's going to sound like Rush. I don't know, you know?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
No,
And see,
but
I love that. I mean, I'm surrounded here by music of all kinds. Like there's probably nothing you can't find. Um, and I like that. And if it's all on the same platter, I'm good with that. Not everybody is, and I get that. Some people need to be focused on a certain,
I
a
think in the
genre.
earlier days of rock and roll, having a theme for your album was a little more important. When people were still buying albums as a whole and looking through the photos and the liner notes and the lyrics and everything, having a theme was important. I don't. I think, and I'm not happy about the way music has gone, that it's gone away from that. But having standalone songs with an accompanying YouTube video seems to be the only thing that people really care about. I don't know if people care about the cohesiveness of an album because nobody listens to albums.
No, I know. It's so
You know,
sad to me.
it's sad because it's an art form that went away. But in terms of what I've done, it might be helpful for me because no one will care that everything sounds incohesive as an album as a whole. Really, there's not like a theme that's going to tie the whole thing together per se. But I think it's going to be unique doing what I do. The only thing I'm not sure about is the songs that have lyrics that require a vocalist. If I
Right.
manage to be able to sing them myself, or if I will hire someone to collaborate with me on that stuff. Because on one side, you want to be able to sing your own songs because they're personal to you. They mean more like, John Lennon singing John Lennon's songs. It's his own personal experiences that are coming out. But on the other hand, if my singing can't be at least up to an acceptable level for the type of songs I'm writing, I would want someone else to do it because I don't want to put out like a crap product with anything that I do. So I'll make those choices as I get down to recording those parts. And I'm probably going to try and take some voice lessons and get better. I have a lot of friends out here who are amazing vocalists, and a lot of pop artists weren't great when they started, but they learned how to become better. And so maybe that's the case for me. Maybe I can get good enough, but the main focus will always be the violin. That's my main thing.
Right. Will you stick to totally electric, or will we hear an acoustic traditional violin?
Oh yeah, the stuff that I write, and all of my arrangements that I do, different songs call for different things. So just like a guitar player, you'll show up to a concert and you'll see a rack of, 10 guitars that they're using for the show, and they're choosing a different one for each song that they're doing. I do the same thing with my violins. You can sort of see some of the collection back there, but I choose a different instrument depending on what the song requires, and I'll do the same thing for the album.
Yeah, fantastic. Any outlook on when we might get something, even a single?
Well, I am busy for the next couple weekends with shows. And then I have a few weeks at the end of August and into September where I don't have anything going on with tour dates or things like that. So I'm hoping to at least get maybe one or two things laid down around that time. And then hopefully have about 10 songs on the album, maybe towards the end of the year, something like that. I've
Wow.
got a lot of great musician friends who are session players who can lay down the parts that I can't play myself. Most notably the drums. That would be the thing I don't do. So,
Yeah. And
um,
and your husband, Brody, I see him playing drums. I see him doing all kinds of things and doing them well. So yeah, there's so much. You surround yourself with talent. You have so much talent. There's no shortage of talent that will be on the record. I'm confident of that for sure. You are coming out by me. September 14th, 15th, the Arcata Theater and Des Plaines Theater in Illinois. You've got a whole bunch of other dates. It's it's an exciting time. You've got a bigger fan base coming. This is great. Do you have a pinnacle, in your mind? Is there a career place or yeah, you're playing small theaters, you're playing, 1,000, 1,500 seat theaters. Is it Madison Square Garden that, the Forum? Uh, is that the dream? What's the mountaintop for you?
I mean, of course, there's iconic places like Madison Square Garden, or like Wembley or something,
Right.
where it's like, can you get any better than that in terms of the venue? For me, I think it would just be getting to a place where we don't have to do these shows where we have to set up all of our gear, tear it down, fly with it every single time we do a show. To be able to park it somewhere for a while and not have to deal with the technical logistics constantly that are just like beat you up mentally and physically when you have to deal with them. That would be great. I think that the shows we're doing near you, September 14th and 15th, Ron Onesti's places, the Arcata on the 14th and the Des Plaines Theater on the 15th. We love Ron and his
Right.
theaters and his whole crew. They're all wonderful people. We also have VIP meet and greets available for those two shows. So anyone listening who's from the area that might be coming, we don't offer those at every show, but those two shows have VIP meet and greets. You can meet everyone in the band and talk to us and chat, take photos, things like that. So you can find those on the websites for femmesofrock.com or the Arcata and the Des Plaines Theater.
Yeah,
Um,
and there'll be links and people, if you haven't gone to those theaters, they're just so comfortable and so warm, and it's just a beautiful VIP experience, and things like that. Yeah, and that is something that is extremely beneficial to the band. You're putting gas in the bus, that's a really important factor for bands. So yeah, please support that for sure. And it's great to hear that you love those venues. And Ron is just such a great guy.
yeah, they've been great to us. We've played there once or twice in the past, and they've always treated us, like family. And of course, I'm like a full-blooded Italian, so I get along with them. And Ron's always got the food and the meatballs and
Oh
everything. Like,
yeah,
oh,
he's got it.
okay, it's good.
Yeah, he's got the meatball. I know he cooks for
Yeah.
everybody, and yeah, I mean, how where does that happen? Ron doing it up. That is something special. Like you say, it's kind of family. I feel that way as a fan when I go there. He greets fans as they come in. It's just a beautiful place, and it's worth a travel if you're anywhere near it. Within a few hours, it's definitely worth coming down and checking out the venue and getting that VIP and feeling like part of the family. It's really, really cool. Nina, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your technical questions about my instrument. A lot of times people don't ask specific things about the mechanics of the instrument like that. So it was good to be able to talk about that a little bit.
And it's so interesting to me. And I did have one other question, and I might as well ask you since you don't mind talking about those technical things. I'm thinking of your production. It's huge. Gene Hoglan, drummer, he was a drummer for the Metalocalypse show, which is kind of does the same thing with the video sync. And so he was talking about his in-ear. It's very different, and he's got a laptop that has the video screen that's behind him because he's the drummer. He really can't turn around. It's right on top of him. It's a whole thing, other than the playing itself, which is complicated in itself. But in your in-ear, something you might not have on a regular gig, where you're just playing. but you have the video sync and you have the full band and you have three other violin players. What's coming into your in-ear? What kind of
So
mix?
the difference between like maybe a regular band and like I said, what I consider us being more of a production show where we have video or lighting or lasers or all three that are going to sync with our show is being on a click track. So I kind of grew up in the click track generation. I don't remember a time of ever recording without one. I've done other people's sessions. So I don't really know the difference between the pros and cons. I know that a lot of people are like, oh, the click track, it's sterile and we hate it and this and that. But for me, it's like I just wasn't around playing big shows before the click track age. So it doesn't bother me. In fact, I actually like having it in our situation because when you go from venue to venue, every situation's a little different. The gear you're handed is a little different every time. And sometimes, if you don't have an ideal situation, it helps you get through it. You know, if you're not having the ideal mix, or if you're having wireless frequency issues and you're not hearing things the way you need to hear, it really helps. Also, the specific nature of my show, four electric violinists, string players who sing with open mics with a rock band of drums, bass, and guitar behind us. So those
Wow.
drums, and they're bleeding into our vocal mics all night long. We're playing violins, which are probably the hardest instrument to play in tune that exists. So we really have to have very specific mixes. And I pretty much take the drums 100% out of my mix so that occasionally, if we're on a big stage, I'll just put a little bit of hi hat, kick, and snare, very little bit. And I have mostly the click track keeping me going because I need to hear my intonation. And when you've got big drums in your ears and you're trying to play a violin, it's just not working, especially in the context of the open mics, the open vocal mics. Whereas a lead singer, they'll kind of like grab the mic and they'll walk around with it and they'll be in front of their mic most of the night, but we don't sing the whole time. We're stepping away and we're doing instrumental stuff a lot of the time. And then we'll come up and sing and talk occasionally. But it would be insane for our tech to have to mute all four mics every time we step away from them for the mix. So, you know, these are things that we're dealing with. So the way that we do it with a click track, with everything synced, you know, in our in-ear monitor system, it's just the way we need to do it for our particular show. If I was going to play in a jazz fusion trio, I probably wouldn't do it the same way. But for my show, this is what works for us. So yeah, we have the click track in our ears.
Okay, yeah. I'm just thinking all of this stuff going on. I mean, do you have the three other players at all in your ear?
Yes, I have the other string
Okay.
players in my ear at a lower level so that I can hear what they're doing and we can still play together. But I don't have them as high as myself. I usually don't need to put the bass in my ears because they're so loud and the subs are usually right under my feet on the stage, rattling us to death. I do have a guitar player in my ears. And there's a few things that we'll put on track that are people we can't afford to bring with us, like keyboards. We can't afford to travel with a keyboard player, so we'll have that coming through as well. And I always enjoy playing home in Las Vegas where I don't have to pay for plane flights because I can bring more live instruments in, you know, for those extra performers or guest artists. We had a live string orchestra backing us up this Saturday in Las Vegas. We had two sold out shows last weekend, and I brought my live string orchestra to back us up for the show. So I always love when we get to do that. And you know, like I said, it all just kind of depends on what the budget is and who I can afford to bring and who I can't afford to bring. So
Yeah, it's such a complicated thing you do, and you do it so well, running the businesses and everything. And best of luck to you with that. And it's so enjoyable to see what you do, and it's really unique. Like I say, to have all those violin players up there with the full band. There's so much sound going on, and it's all orchestrated beautifully. Just amazing what you do, really. And I can't wait to see it. It's
you on the 14th or the 15th or both nights?
15th. It looks for sure on the 15th, and I'm going to try and arrange maybe a date night with my wife for the 14th, maybe too. So yeah, I know a photographer as well. So
Great.
it would be great to because your visual is fantastic with all those players and the interactions and the lights. It's just a beautiful thing you do. So yeah, I'm excited about it for sure, for sure.
Look forward to meeting you. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, you got it. Thank you. And yeah, let's do it again when the album comes out.
Right. Sounds
For
good.
sure. All right. Thank you, Nina. I appreciate you.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.